Hello, welcome everyone to another Digital Photo Mentor weekly photo editing live stream. And today we're going to be working with Luminar. So I've got lots of great images to show you and to work with. If you're joining for the first time, every week I am here doing editing of subscriber and follower submitted images. So the link here is where you can go to submit your images. We do an alternating week of Luminar Neo and Lightroom. So this week is Luminar and next week will be Lightroom. So if you're not a Luminar Neo user, I suggest that you actually follow along and watch anyways, just to see how it works and what it can do, because you might want to consider adding it to your workflow as a plugin if you use Photoshop or Lightroom. That's how I use it. So without further ado, I'm just going to hop over to Lightroom and we'll get started. And I said Lightroom. So I meant Luminar. They're tongue twisters, you know, they both L's. Could come up with some different letters for me. Welcome everybody. Sheila says, down east you're having flurries in the air. Well, that's why I put the flowers. So this is Holly's image on the screen here because I thought we could use some spring flowers first thing today. Vivian, St. Louis, how's the weather there, Vivian? Karen, I think I have one of your images as well. Go with the first one. I'm not sure what that means, Trish. Go with the first one. Hey, Holly. Good afternoon, everyone. Stephanie in Oregon. And Charlene, I have one of your images. I have your flowers and your birds as well. So we're kind of going to do a spring flower start off here. At least we're hopeful anyways that spring is coming. So Marguerite says, haven't bought Luminar Neo yet, but you're interested. Awesome. Okay, so this workflow is going to be completely in Luminar today. So for you, Marguerite, if you're using Lightroom or Photoshop, because I know you've done the Photoshop class, you'll be able to use Luminar as a plugin. So the only difference is how you open it. That's the only difference. But all the tools are the same there, right? Okay, so let me change my screen here so I make the picture bigger. There we go. Everybody can hear me okay, and let's dig in. So I might as well start with this one of Holly's. I do have a few others. I've got these ones of Charlene's as well, and I think this one is Holly's also, but I really love this one of the tulips, right? So I thought this was a great camera angle, really colorful, really creative. So let's see what we can do with this. So right out of the gate, there's some really great composition and colors. We're just going to enhance it. Okay, so as I talk through this, I'm going to talk about, why I'm doing these things and what I'm doing and to enhance it, because the idea behind photo editing is not to fix things, but to enhance an already good picture. Okay, so I'm going to start with the camera profile under develop raw. Okay, so if you're using, like Marguerite, if you're using Lightroom or Photoshop, you can do some of these basic edits in Lightroom first. Okay, I'm going to try the camera landscape profile. And you can see right off the bat, it adds a lot more color in the blue and the green areas, maybe too much. Okay, because there's some weird sort of color fringing happening here, but we can see if we can fix that. Let's see if there's another one that's maybe not quite so vibrant. Okay, we've got standard, neutral. Faithful's not bad. Okay, portrait gives us more of the red, but we have to be careful with reds of going overboard. I want to see if I can fix this issue with the blue fringing here. Down under the optics panel, okay, there's this auto defringe and chromatic aberration. But see, it hasn't fixed this purple. So where I'm looking at is this. Let me zoom out one. There's this weird color fringe or outline between the red and the blue. And it did that when I chose this camera landscape. So I'm just going to go back to either camera standard, or I think neutral was pretty good. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to create that fringe. And we're going to work with the color. Let's see, Adobe Standard was even okay too. So we're going to work with the color in other ways, okay? So I'm not going to rely on the profile in this case because it was not doing a good thing. So after we've applied the profile, now I'm on a Mac, so I have the ability of seeing the histogram. That is something that is coming in a future version of Luminar Neo. They've said probably very soon within the next update, right? So we're hoping that comes out really soon. So I can see the histogram and I can see that it's got some pretty good range. There might be a little bit of something clipping on the right here. If anything, it's probably the highlights on this flower. Okay. So what I want to do is actually give it a little bit more black and white. So I'm going to add some black. And you'll notice that as I do that, okay, see how it's pulling the histogram over to the left because it's adding black and it's clipping some of the blacks, which is fine. But look at the color, right? As I increase the blacks, there's less black, right? Less contrast. The color goes down as well. As I add black, see how the saturation picked up? And now we don't have that fringing purple problem as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave the blacks down a little bit. Exposure doesn't need anything. I'm just going to pull the highlights down and see if we can pick up that highlight here. I don't want to pull the highlights overall. So these are what's called global edits. So you have to be really careful with these because this one is not maskable when it's in the develop raw. Okay, so I can't just apply this to one area. So I'm going to keep it gentle. And then I'm going to come back and work on that highlight with a secondary tool. Okay. So in terms of the actual color, let's add maybe just a tiny bit of sharpness. And let's see if the color itself could be warmed up a little bit. Let's try daylight preset. Okay, so see how that warmed it up? I want to make sure that the blue of the sky doesn't start to look too yellow. So I'm going to make sure it's a little more on the blue side. And I've mentioned this in previous weeks that often if something is yellow, it's usually green at the same time because they're sort of opposite on these two sliders. So if you notice that something is yellow, dial up a little bit of magenta as well as dialing the yellow down. Okay. So let's just see a before and after. So we haven't made a huge lot of changes, just given it a little bit of color punch using that black. Let's apply that. And let's try the enhanced AI. Okay. So that's definitely increasing the contrast. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And Sky Enhancer is going to darken the sky, but let's make sure we don't go too far. Okay, so I'm just going to pull it a little bit. Using the eyeball, just click and hold, you can see what it's doing. Okay. All right, let's jump down to the bottom. I'm starting to change my workflow in terms of I head down to this color harmony tool, sort of second or third. And there's lots of opposite colors here. Okay, so red and green are opposite on the color wheel. Let me see if I can find a color wheel real quick and bring that up. So when you're looking at opposite colors, when they talk about complementary or opposite colors, okay, this is what we're talking about, right? So on the color wheel, right, green and magenta are opposite each other, red and cyan. So opposite is what's called complementary. And when we're dealing with this color harmony tool in this color contrast slider here, that's what it's looking for is these opposite colors, right? So when I drag the amount up, wherever I'm here on this color scale, it's going to increase the contrast of that color. So it's on red right now, okay? And if I drag it over to green, okay, you're going to see it darken the red and give more contrast to the green. See how that's working? But it's also affecting the sky. Okay, so it's overall doing some really nice things, but just going a little too far. Okay, so I'm going to dial it back a little bit. Okay, that looks nice. Now I can also check on the color here. So if the tulips are too red or we want them to be a bit more orange, I can increase the warmth. And this will affect the greens, not so much the greens, but definitely the sky. So see how that's actually adding more blue to the sky and darkening the sky even further. So I'm going to take that a little bit to the left. Again, see each edit off, on is subtle, but they're all sort of building on one another. Okay. Let's see the before and after. So we really don't need to do a lot to this image. I'm going to go do develop one more time. And this time I'm going to take the highlights down really far because I want to pick up just this flower over here. So I'm going to paint it in, probably quite high in terms of strength, just to lower the highlights here. Okay. Maybe here as well. Okay, so I'm just taking care of these bright highlights. I could even do it on this one too. So let's see what that's doing. Okay, see how I've overpainted onto the sky? So if you overpainted, just switch to erase. And then I'm just going to get a smaller brush. I'll just come in closer and erase the parts that I overpainted. Okay. So when you're using the paint tool or the erase tool, you're literally just switching back and forth. It doesn't change what you've already painted. This was actually a question that came up in the Luminar Neo class. It changes what you're painting as soon as you put your brush down next. Okay. As well, I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit and even try contrast because I want to try and get rid of this highlight here. So I'm trying to bring down the overall brightness of this part here. I could actually even go in and add some red to it, right? So I could add some magenta and some yellow. That's a little bit too much yellow. Or we could try and reduce it another way. So now I'm getting kind of a color shift, which I'm not happy about. So that's doing a fairly good job, but I still want to bring that highlight down a little bit more. Right? And I've painted this one too much, so I'm going to erase this one just a little bit. And remember, this is all non-destructive editing because once I apply it, it's over here on your edits panel, and you can come back and change anything that you've done to it. Okay? Back down to the bottom again, I'm going to try the super contrast because I know that I can affect the highlights here, right? So watch what happens to this flower in particular, okay? So I'm just looking to affect the one that has that bright highlight on it. So if I bring the highlights, contrast up, and then take the balance to the right, you see how it's darkening the highlights? So once again, I'm just going to go in here and make sure I have paint. I'll use a smaller brush so I don't overpaint this time. And I'm just getting those little bits there. Okay? See how that's giving it a little bit more color. Okay. Of course, I'm going to add some mystical, but before I do that, I'm going to increase the structure. So I give it a little bit more detail on the flowers. And I want to make sure that the two that are in focus are getting the structure and not the rest. So I'm going to just paint it in to these two. So I want to be able to see sort of the texture and the flower petals. You can see there's a little bit of lines there. So I want to get this leaf. So see just a little bit of texture. And I will probably do the same with details. So again, I might pull it up fairly strong, give it a little bit of sharpening, and then just paint it into where I want it. Just into these guys. Okay. Now I could take it a step farther and do another version of structure and do it as minus and actually erase the structure from the background and make them further blurrier. Okay. See how that's affecting, it's affecting this flower. Watch these flowers here. Okay. Just sharpening those up. Okay. Like that. All right, I've got my eyes tearing today. Allergies are acting up. Okay. Now let's do a little vignette. And I'm just going to leave it centered. Drag it down and just darken those corners a little bit. Look at how much different the color is from the beginning, right? And I didn't touch that saturation slider. Okay. And then, of course, I'm going to add some mystical. And on this one, I might even play with a LUT. I like what Mystical's doing here, right? However, I actually want to try Orton on this one. So I'm going to go to Glow and use Orton effect. It always brightens, so I got to bring the brightness down. Let's see what Orton is doing. So sometimes I'll play with the different ones and see what they do. Okay, so if you're not sure, I'm going to apply Orton here. Okay, and then I'm going to go apply Mystical. And then what we can do is go over to the edit panel and I can sort of switch back and forth. Okay, so that's Orton, right? And in order for me to turn it off, all I got to do is bring this slider down, okay, so I can see Orton, turn it down, or Mystical. Do we have a preference? What's everybody's vote there? Right? They look fairly similar. And Sheila's asking about a Lens Baby. Yeah, this one would be great with the Lens Baby Velvet. It kind of gives you this soft effect. So did you shoot this one with the Lens Baby? Possible, yeah. Well, the fringing you'll get when you have two different colors butting up against each other, and sometimes when you darken one, that fringing will show up, right? When Neo first launched, you said the video wasn't it wasn't a complete replacement for AI, but now you're using only Neo. Have you changed your opinion? The video that I did, Trish, was to talk about the differences between AI and Neo. So it's not a replacement for AI, it's a new product. Okay, so I have switched to Neo partly because that's the most current one, and that's the one that's going to be developed moving into the future. Okay, so AI, it's not really a dead product, but it's not going to have any new features added. So, for example, the things that you don't have, Trish, are relight and layers. Okay, so there's layers again, such as like Luminar 4 had. And if we wanted to put a layer on here, we could add a texture overlay or a bokeh overlay or something like that. So that might be cool. Okay, and also things like in the erase tools, you don't have these new ones as well. Remove power lines and remove dust spots. Okay, so these are like one click and they will remove all the dust spots. So I would say if you're happy with Luminar AI, Trish, then by all means stay with it. But if you want some of the new features, the ones that are coming out, like you said, layers is definitely new and you don't have access to that. So you have limited use of what you can do in AI in terms of you can add a texture or an overlay, but here we can actually add a whole other image on top. Okay, so you can blend images together and do a lot more with it. As well, the new Mask AI and portrait background replacement is coming as well. So if you want to take a look at Luminar Neo, Rob, if you could share a link to both our course and also actually share a link to the free lessons, because Trish, you might want to check that out. There's 2 free lessons in the Luminar Neo course. You can watch lesson 1 and 2 and get an idea and a feel for what Luminar Neo is all about. And you can decide if you want to upgrade or switch. So great question. Okay, so Holly is saying Mystical, and that's the one that I've got turned on currently. So we're going to stay with Mystical, right? The only other thing that I might do with this one, I kind of was playing around or joking around with a bokeh, but we actually could add one and see what that looks like on here, because we could come up with something kind of cool. So as I was speaking, I had this idea of putting these bokeh sort of in the background because the sky is kind of empty, right? So if I add these bokeh, I'm just going to play around and see what the blend mode here. So screen is not bad. And then I just have to mask it off the flowers. Right? Overlay gives us a totally different look. Okay, that's not bad as well. But I'm going to go with probably screen because it's changing the image the least. Right? And I can just kind of apply these subtly, and I'm going to mask it off of the flowers. I don't mind this one over here, and I'm going to keep this one Okay, I'm going to remove these ones from the bottom. So I'm erasing, okay? And I don't mind these ones over here because they kind of add a neat something there. And I don't even mind the ones that are kind of in the background, but I don't want it over our foreground flowers. So I'm just going to erase it from the leaf. Okay. So it looks like it's behind. Okay. See how when I erase it from there, it looks like the bokeh is behind. Like that. And the same thing here. I'm going to erase it from this flower. So again, it looks like it's behind. And the same here. So I'm just using a smaller brush as I go closer to the edge. Okay. How does that look? All right, let's see what that looks like. If I close the mask. Okay, so to turn the layer on and off, you have to go over here and right click, hide it. Okay, so that's without and with. Right, and now I can still mask this to my heart's content. If I want less of the bokeh, I can go in and say, well, I really don't want these ones over here. Just soften them or get rid of them a little bit more so that it's completely behind all of the flowers like that. And it just stays in the background. So you've got some neat things you could play with on this one, Holly. I don't mind that. Okay, you could even go in and do a texture overlay on top of it as well for something fun. So, like so. So there's our before and after. And I'm trying to blend a little better here because you see how I've created a part where I've missed this part in between the sky and the flower. So I just want to make sure I get that part here. So it looks like it's blending a little better. Like that. What do you think? Texture overlay? Yeah, Holly, you've got my set of bokeh, so you should be able to replicate that. And I wasn't even going to do a bokeh, but I thought, okay, well, Trish was asking what's different. So I was like, well, layers. So let's put a layer. Okay, texture works well as well also. Okay. And yeah. Right, so the texture is kind of cool and just kind of maybe even keep it really subtle. Right? I like the soft light one. Something like that. I kind of want to apply a mood on it. I'm going really far with this one, but really, I mean, you could do any of the above. We could have stopped at the color image. We could have stopped with the bokeh. I could choose a lot. Now, this is also something that's new in the latest update is once you've added one of these custom ones, they show up here. Okay, so I added a couple from the Freedom Luts, and they still show up here now. Okay, so I know that they add sort of yellow, and what I had in mind was actually more of the either this one or the sepia, and just keeping it sort of down low. Right. So we could play with some of those. So yeah, fun image to play with, definitely. I like it. Very springy. Question, John says, will this be on my website? No, it's not on my website, John. It's on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on Facebook, which I see that you are, just hop over to John. It's on my YouTube channel. I can't play myself live while I'm live. So there's a link to the actual live, and you can get to it there on the YouTube channel. So once it's finished broadcasting live, it will be there for you to watch on the channel. Yeah, I think this one does work well with the texture and the overlay. It might not be the right texture, just happened to be one that I had loaded in. And I had the idea of doing sort of a more antique look and less of the blue sky. So this is a really good image to play around with different techniques. So now let's take a look at some different flowers. This is one that, now do you pronounce your name Charlene or Charlene? I don't know how you would let me know that in the chat. If it's Charlene with like a SH sound, let me know. Just say SH sound. So she sent me a couple of flowers, and the first thing that I want to mention is that they're a little bit overexposed, and that's why the colors are really kind of bright. So I want to bring the exposure back down, and then we'll bring that color in line. So when we're looking at this histogram here, again, I have the advantage of that because I'm on a Mac. If you don't have that, you kind of currently have to go by what's visual, and you have to really make sure that your monitor is calibrated. I've talked a lot about this in my courses, in the Photoshop course and in the Luminar Neo course, about having a device that looks like this. Let me just make myself bigger here. Having a device, something like this, right, that calibrates your monitor. So my monitor is set to the correct brightness and the correct color so that when I'm looking at it, I can tell whether or not I'm adjusting properly. Okay. All right, so this one here, I know that I'm going to bring the exposure down, and see as I do that, okay, the color shifts, right? And so did the histogram. Okay, so the first thing I did was bring this down. Okay, now if I want to take a look at your exposure information here, you've got ISO 100, f3.5 at 2/50th of a second. It doesn't tell me what shooting mode you use though. So if you can let me know if you're shooting an aperture priority or shutter priority or manual, because you're a little overexposed on this one, and just bringing that exposure down, okay, I'm going to go back here to develop, really solves a lot of the colors problems there. Okay, so I'm going to check off the auto things like usual. And I'm just going to add a little bit of sharpness here. And just double check my curves again. So I like to make sure that I've got black, because then again, look at that color. Okay, so your blacks, you don't want to do things like this, okay? Because when you do stuff like that, and then you try and boost the contrast, okay, you get crazy saturation, and you also have no highlights and no shadows. So you're starting to make everything the same tone, right? So instead, embrace shadows, embrace more black and more shadows, because that's what's going to give you the color and the tonality of your image. So you want highlights and midtones and shadows, right? Now let's look at the color. It looks fairly pink to me, but I'm trying to look at the B. You know, does he look a good color? I think we could warm it up a little bit so we can give it a little bit more yellow, and then maybe take some magenta out. And I didn't play with the camera profile yet. Let's just see if I choose landscape. Okay, that lightened everything. Camera neutral. Camera neutral's not bad. Camera standard's not bad. Okay, let's go with camera standard. I think that one is pretty good. Okay, now let's see our color. We could try daylight. I think it's going to be fairly yellow. Yeah, that's too yellow. See how that temperature changes everything? And I'm just sort of trying to find a happy medium here. Like that. And bring that exposure down even a little bit more. Okay, if anything, I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit, because as I work with this image, it's going to add more saturation. So I'm going to just start by bringing it down a little bit. Enhance AI, I'm probably not going to use on this one, because I know what it's going to do. It's going to punch up the contrast. Okay. If anything, if I drag this one up, it's doing some nice things sort of on this area where I want to bring attention to the B. So I'm going to paint it in, just not quite at 100%, literally just into this small area. Okay, so see how that's punching up the contrast there and just giving us a little more attention on the B. Okay. I'm going to add a vignette because I want to darken the edges. So my trick, darker, feather down. And I know I want to make a circular one and get really in tight on this flower and this bee. And let's just put him right in the center. Okay. Position it first and then adjust your other controls. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I actually want to crop this a little bit as well. So I'm going to go to the crop tool because the bee is fairly centered and there's some nice sort of blurry stuff happening here. And there's some stuff over here that's a little bit busy. So remember, if we look at this upside down, right, where does your eye go? Right? The eye goes kind of all over the place because there's lots of contrast and bright color. Right? So we're going to deal with sharpness and try and make the background less sharp. But by cropping in, I'm going to keep the original aspect ratio. By cropping in a little bit, we can put this bee sort of on the third, keep the blurry part over here, which is a nice balance, and get rid of some of the busy stuff in the background. Okay, so just doing that simplifies the image a little bit, okay? And sometimes images like this, you just can't get close enough, right? Let's take a look at color harmony because we've got some opposite colors happening here, but I'm afraid if I go too far on this one, right? If I go green, it's going to darken the magenta, which actually is not too bad. See how it's darkening the flower color? And if I go magenta, it's going to lighten the magenta and darken the green. So those are definitely opposite colors. So I kind of like what it's doing over here, actually, in this realm. I like that, okay? There's lots of different tools in here. And you can use one or the other. I could have used the color tool. So it doesn't matter how you get to the result that you want, as long as you get there. Okay, so now I'm going to go negative structure, and I'm going to paint some of this blurriness into areas around the outside. Right? So it's minus structure, and I'm doing that to just try and simplify and get the eye again into this area. Okay, so the more we blur the background, the more the eye will go to the bee. Okay. See, that's kind of subtle, but look what's happening over here. Okay. I can always increase it. And then we're going to do the opposite with the details. We're going to bring up the details, sharpen, and then paint in. Okay, so I painted into the background for blur, and now I'm painting into these flowers for sharpen. See that? And if I want to do the bee even more, okay, I can just close the tool, zoom in, okay, because he could be sharper. So we could run him through Topaz, but let's just see what small details does. He's still, oh yeah, look at that. Okay, that does a nice job on the bee. Let's just paint that into our little bee. So as the weather warms up, I'll just do my public service announcement on taking care of our bees. Put a little dish of water out for your bees in your yard to make sure that they are hydrated. A flat dish with some rocks in it will do great. See how that's sharpening him up? Look at how fuzzy he is. Well, he is fuzzy. Okay, and it just sharpens him up a little. Let's see a before. Okay, so see how overexposed and the colors were washed out? And now we've got our bee. Right, now because the two images that she did, I'm going to do some mystical as well, just as a finish. Okay. And I think in this one, I'm going to tone the pink down a little bit. So for me, the pink is getting a little bit too vibrant. So I could go in here and either play with the color of the magenta, Okay, so hue, see how that affects the hue. And I'm just going to go in here and do a little bit of saturation down and possibly even darken them just a little bit. Okay, because the pinks were getting a little bit out of line. That looks better. But now because she's done similar images, right, what we could do here is copy and paste or sync. So if I select both images and I right click, I can now go adjustments, sync. Okay, so the one that's got the blue outline around it, it should pull the adjustments from that one into the other one. Okay, so now you see it did change it, but I'm not sure it's changed it enough. And all the edits that I did on the first one, you can now see applying on this second image, right? Anything that I did with the mask, right? You can see that it also was overly bright. Anything that I painted in with the mask, I'd have to go and redo the mask. And I think we need to darken even more on this one. Okay? So let's bring that down even more. And then I'm just going to go one by one. Okay, so look at, I painted that into this area. So I might just expand it and paint a little more. So that's how you can quickly go from one image to the next when you have images that are similar. Okay, vignettes, okay. Now this one I may actually decide to turn off because there really isn't any opposite colors. So I've turned that one off. Okay, now structure minus, keep in mind I painted that in. Okay, so it's actually very similar in terms of the spot. I'm just going to erase it from this flower so it's not blurring. So I want to keep these ones in the middle sharp. Okay, and then details. So I'm just pressing the / key to get the mask to show. And I wish I could change the color of the mask or the overlay because it always comes out in red. And now I'm painting on red flowers, so it's kind of hard to see. I think that's something that's actually coming in a future version. And now that I've painted that in, I'm going to dial it back down because I've gone too far. And then this one here where I painted the bee in, I don't need this one at all because this one is just giving too much detail to that area. So just get rid of it. Then there's our mystical. And this one removed a little bit of the magenta color. I think I want to get rid of that one as well. And there's our before and after. Okay, so fairly quickly, I took the before from the other image or the after from the other image and put it onto this one. Okay. But the biggest issue there was the exposure, and we were easily able to correct that. Okay. All right, do we have any questions? Please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, especially if you're watching on Facebook, because then you will get a notice. You can hit the little notifications bell, and then it will notify you of when I am live again. So just to give everybody watching plenty of notice ahead of time, we are going to be doing one more Saturday. So next Saturday will be the 7th, and then we're going to be switching to Wednesday evenings. Okay, so Wednesday evening Mountain Standard Time, which would be 6 o'clock, so 8 o'clock Eastern Time on Wednesday evenings. And we're doing that because as the summer and the spring progresses, people tend to want to be outside in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday. Okay, so heads up, we will be switching to Wednesdays very soon. Charlene. Okay, so sure, excellent. Okay, and manual. So when you're shooting like these in manual, Charlene, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your meter because it's going to have that little thing in the middle. So you want to make sure for the most part it's on 0. Also check your metering mode and make sure that you're using like a matrix or one that evaluates the entire scene, and it will give you a more average meter reading. Okay, because these are both fairly overexposed. And then when you look at them in the camera, play back the histogram and make sure you're looking at the image in the playback with the histogram, and it would show you there that it's overexposed. Turn on your clipping warnings. Rob, if you could share a link to the article I did on a histogram. It's called Why Is Your Snow Gray? And it talks about turning on the clipping warnings so that your camera will flash at you if anything is overexposed. Because I think for these ones of the flowers, the highlight parts would be flashing, right? So that means clipping has no detail. All right, let's see. Yes, as Rob said, for the bees, put the rocks in the dish so they can grab onto something if they need to get out. Yeah. Holly's very punny today. I think she's meaning the other image, that it's buzzing. Absolutely. It is buzzing. Smash the like button. Charlene, how do I decide between small, medium, or large details? So with the bee, I chose small details because there's a little trick, and this works in Luminar AI for you as well. The small detail slider works just almost like Topaz Sharpen. Okay, so if you have Topaz Sharpen, you could take the image into Topaz Sharpen. You'd have to export it out of Luminar because they don't currently work as a plugin. That also is coming for Neo. So that's something that another advantage that Neo would have is that you'll be able to take your image from Luminar Neo to Topaz and back again. Okay. So small details I used on the bee because that's what's going to make him look sharper. Okay. So large details are areas like around the leaves and the edges of the leaves, things that are bigger. Medium details would be like the veins and things in the flower. And then small details would be like the fine hairs of the bee. Okay. So it has to do with sizes of details in the actual picture. Okay? Yes, of course, I'm taking care of the bees. We need our bees. I'll let you guys have a conversation about planting things in the garden and everything as well on the side chat there. Yeah, so you could sync the edits, okay? So I chose to show sync, but you can also do copy and paste, okay? So let's say Charlene had 6 or more of these images like this. Then you would select them all, okay? But make sure that the one that's edited, okay, for example, the one with the bee, but let's say I wanted to apply the same edits to all of these ones, okay, I would select them all. Let me make these thumbnails a little bigger, okay, but see the one that has the blue outline around it? That's the one that's currently selected as the goal or the source, okay? So if I right click and I choose sync, it's going to sync from this one with the bee, okay? If I choose sync from this one, okay, let's just do a test here. I'm going to unselect, I'm going to select this one and then these two, and then let's do sync. So it's going to pull the adjustments from this one onto these other two, okay? So if I do sync, it will sync to the other two. So sync applies to more than one image at a time. Copy and paste is one by one, okay? So you can see that it did indeed apply. Okay. It's probably just catching up. There we go. Okay, so you can see how I darkened everything except the bee. Obviously, I'd have to go in and make some edits, right? And these are just her JPEGs that she had worked on, so I can just revert to original. Oh, no, I just undid all my edits. So I've just undone all my edits on this one. Okay, so boo-boo, I had them all selected, and I reverted this one as well. Okay. So yes, syncing, copy and pasting, and reverting, but making sure which images you have selected. All right. So let's take a look at something slightly different. I don't know if Anne is with us today. She sent this neat sculpture image, and I thought this would be fun to work on. So it kind of, I don't know what the heck it's supposed to be, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Oh, it looks like this is in Reykjavik in Iceland. Okay, so I thought maybe this was something in Vancouver, right? But this is in Reykjavik based on the file name. So I'm going to start with develop raw, as I always do. Let's go landscape, if there's a landscape. Okay, so see what that did to the sky. In this case, it did a really good job. And this is actually a perfect example to look at for histogram. So can you see what this histogram is telling me? What is this telling me, you guys? Right? So when I have a big gap like this, right? Stephanie says it's a Viking boat. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. What does this mean when I have this big gap like this on the histogram? Okay, so the images that we just looked at were overexposed or pushed up to the right side of the histogram. Now this one is all pushed over to the left. Okay, so what that means is there's nothing between sort of medium gray, which is about here, and white. There's nothing brighter than medium gray. So it's underexposed. Okay. Now the quick fix is to just drag this part of the curve over until it starts to meet the graph. See that? Like that. But look at how much difference that made, and I've not touched the exposure slider. Okay, so the image is definitely underexposed. So I can push up the white to solve that. So doing this slider here on the curves is the same as doing this one here. Okay, but you can actually go farther with the curves, because if I go with the white slider, okay, it's doing the same thing. It's just pulling it over versus adjusting where the curve is. Okay, so they do very similar things. So that looks good. And we've got lots of black, so I'm not going to worry too much about black, but I can actually even give it a bit more. Okay, so see how as I'm adding the contrast, that texture and the shape of this unique sculpture is coming out. Okay. Let's take a look and make sure our optics, I always check these off. Okay, so if we're worried about color fringing or chromatic aberration, we'll see it around the sides here. Okay, and there ever so slightly is a magenta outline here and a green one here. It's very hard to see. I don't know if you guys can see it, but when I check these boxes off, it's gone. Okay, I see a little bit of noise in here. When I zoom in, not a lot, but I'm just going to bring the luminosity up a little bit. Okay, you have to be careful with noise reduction, because it actually just makes everything look blurry. So now the blue is nice and clear, but everything sort of loses sharpness when you go too high with luminosity. Okay, so I'm going to take that like that. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit of sharpness. Right? And this one is actually a great one for demonstrating what this masking slider does, because when I'm going to bring the luminosity back down. When I sharpen, right, it sharpens everything, right? And I'm going to take masking to 0, and it sharpens the actual noise in the sky. Let me zoom in even more. Okay? Can you see how the actual speckles are being sharpened? Okay? So when I turn the sharpen down, you see the noise, but now when I sharpen it, it's sharpening the noise, okay? But when I drag this masking slider up, what it starts to do is it's looking for edges in the image and only sharpening the edges, okay? So it's eliminating the sky, okay? So areas that are smooth, it's not sharpening as much. So that's what that masking slider is doing. And then I'm just gonna bring the luminosity back. Okay, so see how we've just kind of soften that noise and sharpen the overall image, but without sharpening the noise in the sky. Okay. Right, color. I think the color is pretty good. If anything, it might be a little bit blue, so I could add a little bit more yellow. Right. That looks pretty good. And the sky is naturally dark, but you see there's a dark corner up here. I've noticed something else. Okay. So when I zoom in a little bit, I'm just going to increase the exposure for a moment. Let me just close up some of these tools here. So when I increase the exposure, what I want you to notice is these dark corners here. Okay? So that's vignetting or caused by either a lens hood that's not on correctly, which can happen, or just the lens itself often has dark corners. So back down to this optic panels again, this D-vignette slider, that's what you want to use. Okay, so see how that's taking that away. And if anything, I want to adjust the midpoint. Okay, so that's definitely helping. Not getting rid of it completely, so it could be an issue with the lens hood. So we may either have to crop that or deal with that another way. So I've decided to leave the exposure up just a little bit as well. But you can definitely see that bright corner or the dark corner there. It looks a little bit crooked to me as well. So I'm going to close develop and choose crop. So I'm looking at the horizon. Can you see that? The horizon looks crooked. So I'm going to click horizon alignment. Okay. And it definitely did correct it. Let me just see how well it did though. So I'm going to go farther with it. Can you see this part of the land here in the water? So if I correct it fully, I'm losing part of the statue. Okay. So I'm just going to undo and just accept the minor adjustment that it made. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to fully adjust it without losing too much of the base. Okay. So I'm going to adjust it a little bit. And then I'm going to go freeform to just come down from the top, which gets rid of those dark corners. Okay. So we haven't really done much to this image at all, other than I'm waiting for it to catch up on me here. Okay. Other than really just correct sort of for the exposure. Okay. But I don't think this one needs a whole lot. We can do accent AI, which overall generally on an image like this, look at what a great job it does. Okay. If anything, I find it's taking the sky a little bit too far. Right? We can do sky enhancer. Now look what happens. Right? Unlike that. And there's no need to replace the sky like this because it's already fantastic. I'm just going to go and adjust the color a little bit because I find this blue is kind of, I don't know, too blue. So let's adjust the blues and see if I can make it more sky color, if that's a thing. There we go. And I'm just going to adjust the saturation of the blues as well. So just bring them down a little bit. See what the color tool is doing. So to me, the sky was just getting a little bit surreal or unrealistic looking. So I just adjusted that. Okay. Let's see what super color harmony is going to do here. I want to really see if I can punch up this statue. So I'm going to go over the yellow. Right. Here's another great example of the opposite colors. So the yellow in the statue is picking up some sun and then this blue sky. So if you wanted to, you could get really dramatic with this one. Okay. We can definitely darken. And then if you want to not have quite so much vibrance, right? Here they're calling it brilliance. We can dial it down just a little. But look what that tool is doing. You see how that's picking up that yellow on the statue while simultaneously darkening the sky. Okay. And again, we have full control. And if we like what it's doing on the statue, but not on the sky, we can mask it out. So I'm going to erase at about 30% with a really big brush. And I'm just going to do like 1 or 2 passes over the top part of the sky. That's it. Okay, so I'm just softening the effect on the top of the sky. Maybe 1 more pass. Okay. So it's not getting so dark. Like so. So I really like what that's done. Really like it. Right? We could also do a structure on here and paint it into the statue, or we could even try black and white because this is a really interesting image in terms of tones. So you could try this one in black and white. And again, here we might actually want to go back and undo what I just did with the darkness of the blues and really punch up the other colors and give it something really contrasty. Okay, so this might make a fun black and white as well. But I kind of like it in color. So that's pretty much what I would do with this image. There's lots of these complementary or opposite colors, right? So as soon as I see that, I'm going to head to color harmony. Okay. Let's ditch that. And I don't even think I'm going to put mystical on this one. I think I like the structure of this one. If anything, I'm going to add a little bit of structure to it. Let's see what it does. So again, if we add structure to a high amount, it's doing not a great thing on the sky, but I want to keep it a little bit lower and then just paint it in to the statue. So I just want this structure in this area. Maybe in the clouds. See how that's really bringing out sort of that, look at that texture in the metal. See that? And we've got a couple of legs over here. Let's see if Erase can get rid of these legs. All right, I'm just going to do these legs first. There's a head up there too. Cross our fingers. Let's see. Trish says she likes the black and white. Okay, so that did not a bad job, but it's sort of, you know, crooked. So once again, I would just go with a smaller brush. Try and correct that edge. Okay. And if you can't get it, paint over it again. Okay, so I'm kind of getting something that looks like it might be realistic. I'm just trying to blend the edge of that concrete there. And that looks more realistic. Okay, and then let's see if I can get rid of this head. It looked like it filled it in with a statue. So it's not bad. I'd probably zoom in and do sort of smaller strokes and get rid of it a little bit slower. These are the kinds of things where if you just paint, you know, one big blob, you end up with a blob, right? So I would zoom in a lot closer and try painting. Yeah, see, now I made a mess. So on these ones, just do restore if you make a mess. And I'm going to undo the head as well. So Anne can work on these a little bit more. I would say, you know, come in like here and closer and do little bit by little bit. So I would do the feet first and see if we can get that. Okay, that did a better job. Okay, so let's just do one strip at a time and see what happens. Yeah, that one didn't work so great. So not as much. Let's do the foot. So you really have to be patient. Yeah, see, that did a better job there. You really have to be patient when you're doing Erase and let it do its job on smaller areas. Now we're getting somewhere. And you see how I'm just kind of picking away at it here, little by little. She's losing her legs. She's becoming an amputee. But you see, there's also a reflection here. So if we're erasing her, you also have to go in and deal with the reflection. So remember, if you've got reflections in water or anything like that, you need to go deal with it here too. Okay. So like so. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you get the idea of how to go about erasing. You just have to do it little by little. Okay. Now notice too, this head, there's a reflection of the head down here. So if I can get this head removed, you have to make sure to remove the reflection as well. So look for those kinds of things because it's those little details that will make or break your editing, right? People will look at that and say, yes, I can tell it was edited because there's a head and a reflection. So I'm not having as much luck with that one. But you see the difference just getting rid of those feet. It's going to take a little bit more work, but you got the idea. All right, let's see. I'm doing the dance with a denoise. So which is the part you get confused about, Sheila? So noise is the speckly bits, right? Again with the eagle eyes. Sheila likes, or Trish likes the black and white. Awesome. Yeah. So smaller, like zoom in to 100%. You could zoom in even to 200% and really do those smaller areas and you'll have a lot more success. Yeah. Okay. So again, the eagle eye thing is about training your eye. And the more you look for these things, right, the more you'll see them. Okay. Let's do another image. Okay, let's see who else is here. Sue's, Mark's not here. Mom, let's see, whose is this one? This is Marty's, I think. Karen's here, right? Let's do one of Karen's. So we've got some ducks, another sign of spring. Okay, and the ducks are a little dark again. Okay, so we've got the same sort of issue, and we could see the histogram as well. So watch when you're shooting. If you're using aperture priority, okay, make sure that you're on 0 and try using evaluative metering. There should be an article, Rob, that Andrew Gibson did recently on metering modes. If you could share that one, please, Rob, talking about metering modes. For the most part, I use evaluative or matrix metering, which measures the light in the whole scene. Okay, because watch what happens if I just start to bring this up so it meets the graph. Okay? So I haven't touched exposure. Okay, so always do your whites first before you do exposure. Okay, because if I try and adjust this with the exposure slider, right, look how far I have to go, and then it sort of makes the midtones muddy. Okay, so I'll usually do a combination of both, but I bring the whites up first, right? Then I don't have to go as far as exposure. Okay, see, before I was up to +1.5, +2, now I'm only plus like 0.5. Okay. Now this one needs a crop because I wouldn't leave a lot of this space. I do like the reflection, but they're right in the middle. But I want to get rid of some of the extra space. So this is what's called negative space here, and it's the visual mass. So the water has a lot of visual mass, and it's taking up a lot of the attention. Okay. Before I leave here, I'm just going to, we'll check for noise. So when you have an image that's underexposed as well, you will get some noise. So anytime you punch up the exposure, you have to also watch for noise. Okay. Now the duck's not super sharp, but we're going to deal with that on the other sliders. Let's see about making them just a little bit warmer. Okay, so I'm going to choose daylight. They look a little bit green to me, so let's give them a little bit of magenta. We could even actually try cloudy. I do find that these two presets here come out a little on the green side. Right? We can check out one of her camera profiles as well. We can check landscape. Well, that's interesting. That gave us a lot of contrast. Maybe too much. Oh, camera standard. That looks good. Let's go with that. That looks really good. So see our before and after. So I'm going to crop it next. Let's see what Luminar does for a crop. Okay. So it suggests coming in a little bit. And I do like the idea of you want more space in front of them. Okay. I like the idea of keeping the reflection, maybe not as much. And in terms of having them sort of in the middle this way, I don't mind that so much. I want to get some of those leaves. I think it's mangrove, right? And some of the reflection. So about like that. Okay? Honestly, I might even get rid of some of the reflection even more, okay? Because there's a lot of water here. Let's just see. Let's see what happens if we do something panoramic. Like so. So we still got a reflection, but not as much. Now the ducks are a lot more in focus in terms of seeing them, right? Let's deal with that focus issue. So the question that we just had about when to use which of these sliders, okay, so I'll just take them all up. Okay, so medium details is doing a great job on stuff like the water and the feathers. Okay, small details looks for like the details of each feather, okay? But you can also see that it's sharpening up the eyes a little bit. So what I might do is apply this one twice. So I generally, bring the sharpen up a little bit, take the masking up higher, and I'm trying to look at the overall image, but it's picking up a lot of grain because of these small details. So the small detail slider sharpens grain. So I'm going to actually leave this one down low. And let's just see what it's doing without the small details. So it's doing a great job on the rest of the image. So I'm going to apply it like that. And then the other benefit, Trish, of Luminar Neo that you don't have with Luminar AI is I can apply this one a second time with different settings. Okay, so now I can bring the small details up and the sharpen and just paint it in to the eye, for example, or to the beak. So the parts that I want to look a little bit sharper, okay, I can apply those small details, right? Keep in mind that if I paint over the whole face, I'm going to get a little bit more noise there, but that's okay. But see how now the face of that duck looks a little bit sharper. Okay? So another benefit of Neo over Luminar AI. So I think I might need to do a video on that, actually. Let's add a little edge vignette. Okay, so darken. Okay, so we need to make it smaller because it cropped in a lot. And I'm just going to do it like that. And I want to adjust the crop a little bit more because, again, my eagle eyes, see how I saw this little yellow bit on the side here, and it's just taking my attention. So I'm just going to, oops, once it comes into line here, crop that stick out. Okay. Could I erase it out? Yes. I will, however, erase this highlight. Okay, so I'm going to use erase on this one. So I want to get rid of that highlight. See how that works. I could have used the something else. Could have used develop, but I just want to erase it and see how good a job it does here. Fill it in with a leaf. That looks pretty good. And I could do the same with any of these little highlights here or this one here. Okay. Remember, anything that's going to draw your eye is bright highlights, sharp contrast, sharpness again, and bright colors. Okay. Let's do, I just got an idea on this one. I don't know if color harmony is going to do anything here, but let's try. Okay, so let's see if we want to increase the contrast in the ducks. That's definitely yellow. Okay. But overall, I could live it. I could take it or leave it. Right? I could take it or leave it. It's kind of giving some backlit effect on the leaves and highlighting the ducks and the reflection a little bit more. So that's not bad. I'll just leave it a little bit lower. Okay. But I had an idea with this one, doing a mood. Okay. So I've got still my Luts on my desktop. So I'm going to open up these cheat sheets or contact sheets. If you want to share a link to these, Rob, of how to get these, if people don't already have them, this would be good for you, Trish, because this is actually Luminar AI. That's one advantage currently that it has over Neo is you can't see a preview of the LUT currently in Luminar Neo where you can in AI. And I already have an idea of what I want to do with this one. I'm probably going to go right to sepia. Of course, I'm not finding it now. I'm going to go either right to sepia or smoky, as those are kind of two of my favorites because I want to give this one a more brown look. Okay, and I want to focus more on the ducks and less on the leaves. Okay, so sepia, or what's the other one I said? Smoky. Okay, so smoky's not bad. Let's try that. Let's go with smoky. Now see what it's doing. It's minimizing the green. It's adding contrast, which is not a bad thing, but I can adjust that if I want less. Let's see what this takes if I take it all the way to the 100. Okay. It does some really nice things overall, definitely adding a lot of contrast. I'm going to apply it fairly strong, so somewhere up around 70, because I like what it's doing on the ducks, and it's minimizing the green of the leaves, so it's bringing more emphasis on them. Okay, it's making the water look brown. Okay, so if I don't want the brown water, you know what I'm going to do is get a big brush and erase it off of the water. Okay. So now the water still looks green. Okay. So there's a before and after. I probably would not add mystical on this one just because I sharpen up the ducks a little bit. If anything, I could add mystical and just paint it in to the leaves. So I like what it does on the background. Okay. So big brush, paint it in just to the foliage. All of the edits I'm doing are always about those four things, right? So I'm reducing sharpness on the background. I'm adding sharpness to the subject. I'm reducing contrast to the foreground elements in the background and increasing it on the subject. Okay. So there we have our little ducks swimming in the water. So Rob just says, if you want your photo to appear with your comment, update your Google account, and it will pull your photo from your Google account. Charlene says, interesting how the lines in the water line up perfectly with the neck of the mama duck. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's the reflection, right? So it is lining up. All right, Karen. So that's your job to now try and mirror that and create that, just like Holly has to play around with her tulips. I think I've got time for one more. Let's see what else is kind of springy. That one's fall. Let's do... whose is this one? Rob's. So this is Mark's image. And I'm going to do this one because umbrellas, spring rain, right? Spring showers. So let's take a look from the beginning, all the same things. So I know that I'm going to need to adjust the exposure because, again, I can see the same problem. So to start, I'm just going to push that up a little bit and give it a little bit of exposure. Then I'm going to go up here and change the camera profile. Let's see what we get with some of these different ones. Okay, so landscape definitely adds contrast. That's standard. Portrait will generally give more red, okay? But it also sort of gives us more detail. So I don't mind portrait, okay? Vivid gives you a lot of contrast. I almost never choose the camera vivid profile. And in this case, I think I like the portrait one. Okay, so I'm going to work with the portrait one and give it a little bit more black. I'm going to bring the highlights down. So the highlights is sort of that sky and the middle bits of the umbrellas. Brighten it up a little, and then we can just pick the color. Okay, so let's try daylight. Definitely warmer, maybe a little too red. Okay, that's definitely red. So I'm going to go with daylight. Take a little bit of this yellow down. Something like that. So far, we're just brightening it up. Okay. Make sure we check these off just in case. And do we have some noise? Yes, we've got a little bit of noise. One other thing that I wish they would bring back in Luminar Neo is I can't check my exposure without going back to the catalog. I have to go back here to check the ISO and so on. So this was ISO 3200 f22 at 1/45th of a second. So if Mark is watching this, I'll send him a note and let him know that I worked on this image. I would definitely lower the ISO and the aperture. Okay, so it doesn't need to be shooting at f22 here. And you can lower the ISO accordingly as well. So I'm definitely going to do some noise reduction here. And we'll come back and do some noise reduction probably in the other tool here as well. Okay, and paint it in. I'm going to go to landscape. And it may seem like an odd choice, but there's lots of green and yellow umbrellas as well as blue sky. So I'm going to bring the foliage enhancer up. Now see what that does? It's picking up all the green in the umbrellas. And of course, we need to shift the hue a little bit. Right? So foliage enhancer is picking up those colors, right? As well as golden hour. Okay, so it doesn't seem like, okay, this is a landscape image, but don't forget this tool applies to colors, right, as well. dehaze is going to add black. So similar to if I added a bunch more black, that's actually doing a nice job on the umbrellas as well. All right, let's see what else. Let's zoom in and see that noise again. So there is a little bit of noise, but it's not so bad. I definitely feel like the whole image could be a little sharper. Considering it's at f22, I feel like I'm looking for where is the sharpness. And it almost looks like it's focused sort of slightly behind the umbrellas. So you really want to be careful of where you put your focus. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you see that this balcony is sharper than the umbrellas? Okay, so it means that the image is slightly back focused. Okay, so I'm going to use some denoise here. And I do see a little bit of color noise. So if you see like green and magenta speckles, that's color noise. And I'm going to do some sharpening. Okay, so this is where I'm going to bring the smart details and the medium details. And I may want to paint it into all the umbrellas, every single umbrella, but that's going to be a lot of work. Okay. And notice that as I do that, it's increasing that noise again. Remember? So as I sharpen, see the noise on the green umbrellas, the noise gets sharpened. Okay. So be really careful about adding a lot of extra sharpness when you have a high ISO or grainy image like this. Again, especially if it's underexposed. So noise comes from multiple different sources. It comes from a high ISO image. It comes from underexposure and boosting the exposure, and also from long exposures and at nighttime, because in the blue channel of your image, like red, green, blue, that's where the noise lives. So you'll get lots of noise in sort of your nighttime or blue hour images. Okay. So what do we think about the cropping on this one? I want to see if it's straight, first of all, and I still feel like the color is not quite right. So let's just see about cropping. I'm going to click horizon alignment and see what Luminar thinks. So it did straighten it a little bit. Okay. It's hard to tell on this one, and we could definitely go in and sort of use some of the distortion corrections if we go back to develop. So I'm going to apply that crop. Actually, I'm going to go back in and crop a little more. See that thing in the bottom left here? I don't like it. So, or bottom right, sorry. Can't tell my left. There's like a fire extinguisher or a balcony. So I'm just going to crop that out. And I might go equally in on this side because we've got some air conditioners. And I will keep the umbrellas centered, but see how that just got rid of some of the stuff on the sides, right? Now, interestingly enough, there's some power lines here. Let's just see if the erase tool can find them. So I'm going to go erase, remove power lines, and see what happens. They're kind of all over the place, and there's one actually twisting right into the umbrellas. So I would be surprised if it gets it, but I'd be really impressed if it does as well, because that's a complicated one. So see how it's thinking and thinking. All right, let's see what everybody's talking about over here. It's autumn where Trish is. Yes, awesome. Shooting the colors last weekend. Lovely. Crop out the top umbrella spokes. Yes, I'm going to go do that, Holly. I saw them as well. Good eye. Now let's see what this did. Holy cow. So it did a lot, actually. Look at it's erasing a good chunk of the stems of the umbrellas. You see that? So I'd have to mask this or restore on the umbrellas, but look at it cleaned up this sidewall here, and it did a pretty good job, and it tried to clean up this one over here, right? That's going through and around. So actually, I could probably start here and use this and just do a restore on the parts that I don't like where it did, like the umbrellas, right? So that's actually really surprising. But see, it also took away the stem of that umbrella, okay? So we just have to do a little bit of restoring and fixing. Let's just kind of go in here a little bit. So you want to look for stuff like this, okay? So see how it's kind of missed the lines. So it's removed the wire, but it's replaced it with a crooked line. So when I do this, I just go along the actual line with a small brush, and usually it gets the message and fills it in straight. See that? So it didn't do a straight job automatically. I'm just going in and helping it a little bit. And then there's some bits here where, you know, it didn't quite get this wire, so we could go in and remove it a little bit more. Again, we have to make sure that the edge is being blended nicely. Okay, now I've just made a mess. So I'm going to restore. And I'm just going to do it little by little again. So this was another one where you can do a good job with this tool. You just have to take your time and go little by little, like so. And then over here, let's see what it's done over here. Surprisingly well, right? Look at how much it's cleaned up here. And I don't even notice any of this stuff on the wall here. Okay, but it has removed some of the umbrella stems, right? So we need to put the stems back. And I kind of just have to eyeball it and do it one by one, right? So a little bit more work. Oops. Like so. So there's a wire in here and there's a wire in here, and I'd have to go through and go restore on the bits that are missing. Okay. Let's just do that. So where you paint and click restore, it puts it back. Right. Get the handle back. Okay, so a lot more work on this one. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you get the idea. Okay, so I'd have to go back and just do a paint over here because it's really taken away all these handles of the umbrellas. Right, so we'll just do a quick restore on all these. There we go. Let's get the handles all back. Again, I'm not going to completely finish this one. I just want to show you the idea. There's still a few missing handles in there, but I've started at the bottom. Okay, and you can see that I can definitely get rid of that wire. Okay. All right, now cropping out the top, she said. All right, let's just come in a little bit. Right. Now, the reason that Holly suggested cropping these out at the top is I don't like to leave little bits of things. So she's absolutely correct. I'm going to come in enough to get rid of them, or enough that I can clone out just the ends. Right. I'd rather crop off the top of this top row here than have the other ones sticking out. Okay. That looks pretty good. I think a mystical on this, instead of trying to sharpen it, let's just go with something and give it some glow, right? So mystical might work well, or in this case, glow itself. So there is an actual glow setting, and what that does is it will make the sky itself glow around the umbrellas. See that? So it gives them almost even more of a backlight kind of look. Okay. So it does that. So another fun image for spring that we can play with. And this one is for Mark to try and replicate. And of course, there's a lot of other tools in here too. You know, we haven't played with dramatic, or we could actually even try high key. So even though that's a portrait tool, okay, so dramatic does some neat things and adds some nice contrast. Right? Again, I could apply this to just the umbrellas or just the building. So I want to make sure I keep the saturation. Okay. Because I like it sort of what it's doing on the building there. So dramatic is another one. And the other one I had in mind was high key. Right? Again, usually for portraits, but it doesn't have to be. Right? So I like the dynamic high key a little better. So it's again sort of bringing that white up. and minimizing. So we're losing some of our color there, so not my favorite. We could also kind of go a little bit more abstract on this one by cropping it even farther and getting rid of most of this building. Okay, so let's go just umbrellas. Right? This might actually make a cool zoom burst or something as well. Okay. All right. So Sheila's giving me a nice commercial. Thank you for that, Sheila. Neo is worth the money, plus my extensive Neo training in the Luminar Neo course. All right. So if Trish decides to upgrade, then I would definitely recommend the course. And Rob has put a link in the chat for you as well. Jack says, would it have been faster to have done the wires manually than each umbrella stem? Probably at this point, because I'm putting more stuff back than I am erasing. But the automatic removal of the power lines did a great job on that one area. So I think I would probably just use a really big brush, right? So if I go back to that one to answer Jack's question, I think the automatic did a better job on the erase than I could have. So if I just take a really big brush and paint over like most of the areas, I don't want to get the part that I want to erase, right? And if you're not sure, hold down the backslash key, right? And I can see that that's where I'm erasing that wire. So I want to make sure I don't put that back. And then I'll just restore, right? So now the only bits that I'm missing are on these ones over here. Right? Now I can just go back and restore some of those stems. Okay. But I think it did a really good job trying to remove that wire that was quite complicated. Great question, though. Trish has the same question. So you and Jack are on the same track there, Trish? And yeah, I think this one would make a really cool twirl. Okay. For those of you that are in the Photoshop class, we did a twirl where I took an image, and I'm just going to put this one back actually to the original crop. Let's just tilt it. And I think I can open from here into Photoshop. So let's open in Photoshop. So guess what? We can do a twirl. Okay. What's holding up the umbrellas? Good question. Probably some wires, Marguerite. So if we remove the wires, then the umbrellas will fall down, right? So yeah, we probably need some wires. All right. So to preparing this image to take it over to Photoshop. Any other questions about Luminar Neo versus Luminar AI or older versions, or Luminar Neo versus Photoshop, or any of that kind of stuff while I'm waiting for this? Any questions? So I'm going to make this a smart object. You guys can't see my layers, but let me just fix that for you. Where's my... I don't have my actions. Okay, so we want to do actions. And they opened up over here. So what I did for the folks in the Photoshop class is I created an action. And we've got the abstract twirl effect. So literally all I have to do is press play on this. And it's going to run a series of things that I recorded as an action. Okay, so an action in Photoshop is just a series of steps. Okay, so you can see that it's applying them. Well, you can't see because I got the layers over here. You'll see in a moment. So it's applying different things on my layer, and then it's copying the layer and changing the blend mode, and you'll see the difference in a moment. So it runs pretty fast. Lots of flowers and birds today, Trish says. Yeah, like I said, just turned out to be a springy kind of day. So fall where you are, but you still got birds and colorful leaves. So. That's a great question, Marguerite. When you add a bokeh layer, can you choose the color of the bokeh? So the ones that I added are from my bokeh set. If you want to share that, Rob, it's in our it's in our ultimate editing bundle, and also the what am I trying to say? It's in our ultimate editing bundle and also the ultimate bokeh bundle. And they do have a color on them, but I'll show you how to change the color because I applied one that was blue on Holly's image. And here we have our twirl action. So Jack wants to know, is the action available? I did share the action with everybody that took our Photoshop 1, 2, and 3 courses. And if you are in that course, it's available for download there. But I'm wondering if we can make that as something available as a download, Rob, for people that want it. But if you want to share a link to our Photoshop 301 class, Jack, is Photoshop something that you use on a regular basis? Maybe you would benefit from the Photoshop class, okay? I like the peanut gallery comments here. So the ooh, ah, and then we got a ooh la la, nice twirl. Awesome. All right, so let's see. We've got this twirl now, and this is how it's done on the layers, okay? So the action creates those things, and it's literally like that's the bottom layer. Okay, let me move my layers over here. Okay, so that's the bottom layer, and then that's the top layer, and they're just blended together, right? But the cool thing about it is I can actually change the amount of twirl. It's totally customizable, right? So for example, I could choose a different base filter, okay, and it gives me a different look. I think this one gives me more lines, okay, and then it reapplies them all again. So yes, it's going to take me a moment here. So there's the Bokeh overlay pack. Rob shared a link to that in the chat. And we'll have to put some thought into that action, Jack, and see how I can get that to you. So let me know if you're using Photoshop and which version of Photoshop you're using, Jack. Is this the first time you've joined us? Thanks for joining, and I'm not sure where you saw it, but thanks for joining. I posted it on my Facebook. Okay, so the twirl, I can actually add more twirl or less twirl. Let's do more twirl. Okay, so I can totally change the look of it by changing the amount of twirl. Did I look at the number? No. I generally want the top one to match the bottom one. And changing the blend mode will change it as well. So it's just kind of a fun thing to play with. And a couple of my students, Anne has really run with creating these blended looks. Okay, so I just did that to get the number. With these blended looks of taking an image like this and then using this as your background for something else. Or you could put this in the background of the umbrella shot that we used to create this, right? And it made a cool little twirl because it had so many neat colors and things in it, right? So this one, it was 240 something. Let's go over there, right? So it just creates a totally different look. And I can change the blend mode here to get completely different looks here as well. Let's try lighten, screen, right? Ooh, that's kind of cool. Look at that. That's kind of neat, right? So by changing the blend mode, I get a completely different look, right? If I like color burn, I can also change the opacity, right? So now we're getting into a Photoshop class, but it's kind of fun, okay? So from here, I just need to save that and then import it back into Luminar, and then I can use it as a background or as an overlay, okay? But let me just head back here because I wanted to answer the question about changing the color of the bokeh overlays. I think that was Marguerite, okay? So when I added this bokeh, you'll see that it's blue, okay? I'm just gonna hide this texture for now or delete it because I don't really want the texture. So with this bokeh, okay, if I increase the opacity, you can definitely see that the bokeh are blue and sort of pink, okay? But if you want to change the color of them, right, we're on this layer. So we're on the bokeh layer. We can literally just go in here and actually make them black and white. Or we could completely shift the color more yellow. I think it's going to take a minute. See the color of the bokeh change? Okay, so now they're more yellow, like so, okay? Or more blue and more pink. So you could totally change the color of the bokeh, or just remove the saturation from the bokeh so that they're just white, okay? And the white's not bad either. I don't mind that. So yes, you could totally change the color of your bokehs. Spin art. Yes. Does anybody remember going to like the carnivals and things and playing with those paint spinners as a kid? They would give you this canvas thing and you'd kind of squirt your paint down into it and then it would spin and make this funky design. That's kind of what it reminds me of. If anybody else has done that at the carnival. Okay. Charlene says she's using the same version, the current version of Photoshop. She'd love to get this action. So let's we'll work on creating that as a place where you can download that on our website, Charlene. So I believe you're on my email list, Charlene, right? So send me an email. For now, I will send it to you by email. And Jack, if you're not currently on my email list, I'd love for you to join us because then you won't miss anything. So we're going to come up with a way for everybody to get this action. Kind of aside today from our Luminar discussion, but we'll come up with a way for you to get that. And I've got your comments, Jack, so I know how to reach you on Facebook. Right. You've got the Photoshop class, Trish. Yes. So this one, the twirl was in Photoshop 301. So you've got that to look forward to. I wanted to put some fun stuff in there so it wasn't all boring techniques and cloning and removing things and stuff like that. So we're coming up on an hour and a half. And I think we're going to stop there for today. Yeah, our Photoshop students have come up with some amazing twirls. Actually, let me just see if I can find them. I know that they were posted in our digital photo mentor group, so we can share a link to that as well. So if you are not already in our main group, do come and join us at this link here. And I'm just going to try and see if I can find that image for you on Facebook and show you some of the cool things that our students have been doing with this zoom trick here. Here's another cool one, actually. So this is our group, and I would love for you to be part of the group if you aren't already. There's another cool one that Phil did. He did this with a zoom in camera and then blended it with the original unzoomed image. And I'm just looking for this one. The group that I run here, there's the one that Wendy did. So this one is really cool. Okay, so she took the flower, she did kind of a twirl, and looks like she added some green. And she overlaid it with this picture of the owl to come up with this, right? How cool is that? That is really cool, I think. And Anne came up with something equally cool. Probably gonna find it in here easier, where she did one with a lamp. So there's the lamp, right? So she's used that twirl as the background, and she actually said that she became top 10 in a challenge she was doing this week for the topic of lamps, right? There's another twirl. Okay, so people are getting really creative with it. And there's one more that Anne did. Okay, so Anne has now done the twirl from something with green and then put the flower and sort of just masked part of it in like she did with the lanterns. Okay, so people are getting really creative with this one. Right, there's one that she did, and she actually put it over her Easter eggs. So she made disco Easter eggs for Easter using the twirl. So these kinds of things are, stuff that you're not going to do all the time, but they're just really fun, right? So I'm going to stop here and just make sure that I have something to show you on my screen here. Let's close that one. So if you are interested in the Luminar Neo course, that's how to get to it. I'll make myself a little bigger. So it actually has its own website, CompleteNeoCourse.com. You can get to the Neo course to check that out. We've had just around 300 students go through the class, and they absolutely loved it. They're learning tons. There's 29 lessons, 28 lessons, and something like 15 hours worth of videos and tutorials and Q&As. You get my raw files to work with as well. So just like if you've done the Photoshop class, you get some raw files. This one, you get a full set of raw files to work with, and some bonus items like skies and textures as well. And reminder again to submit your photos. So that's the link. I got crazy hair today, so hence I'm wearing my little Ukraine solidarity headband. And I'd like to remind you to submit some more images. Next week is going to be Lightroom. So again, I may go to Photoshop like we did today. That was kind of a little side, but mostly it's probably going to be Lightroom. And we'll see if I pop over to Luminar or Topaz if we need to do any of those kinds of things. All right. Karina Lynn, first time attending. Thanks for joining us. Do remember to subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, which I see that you are. So subscribe and hit the notifications on this one, because then you'll get a notice when we are going live again. We are doing this again next Saturday for Lightroom, same time. And then we're switching to Wednesdays. So just a reminder that as of the, what date is that going to be? The 18th, we will be on Wednesday. Okay, so Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's 5 hours later than we started today. So wherever you are joining in from. Right, so that hopefully we'll get some of our European visitors, as it was a little bit late for them in the middle of the night. Thanks for joining, Trish, Sheila. Thanks for joining, Jack. Right, Al, great to see everybody. Stephanie, as usual, awesome. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's decent outside here in Edmonton. Hope you don't get too many flurries, Sheila. Take care, and hope spring hits you and you get some beautiful fall colors down south, Trish, and we'll see you soon. Take care.